been to any kind of conferences or anything, they always, I don't care what industry you're in, I've learned there's conferences for everything. I've got buddies of mine that are in the storage unit business, and they have a conference too. Skating ring people have conferences. Everybody has conferences, and it always cracks me up when people say this. If they're the speaker, I understand I'm between either you and lunch, you and food, or you going home. So I understand I'm between you and lunch. And so I don't know if you smell it or all the things. I'm trying to bump that for those of you. Chili? Breathe. Yeah. Go off. Still working on that part. But this morning, and I joke and I'm serious as there you go, just took a little time. We've been going through Acts in Sunday school, and again, I want to encourage you. We have good food, we have good fellowship, and good time in the Word as we're going through Acts. And this morning, as we'll be looking at the end of this chapter, or end of the story next week in Sunday school, it's been fun going through it. And so encourage you to be, if you can, make it. Again, we start at 10 and have breakfast, and it's just a good time. So, but as we look and we start transferring from, we've been talking about Saul, and now we start going toward Peter. One of my favorite moments in the Bible, which may sound cheesy to some, is actually in this chapter. And so, but I want to dive in and talk, and again, we will be in Acts chapter 10. And so looking forward to, when I was reading this and you get to Peter's vision, and then you go back and read in Leviticus 11, all the more reason why I don't want to give my t-shirt away on YouTube. You can ask me what I want my t-shirt to be in church. But I'm a big fan of bacon. I don't know about you, but I'm glad bacon is good to eat. Because as we read in here in a minute, at one time, some people thought bacon was not good to eat. And so, but we'll begin in verse 1 of chapter 10 as we move and continue to talk about Peter. At Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. He and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day, at about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, "Cornelius." Cornelius stared at him in fear. "What is it, Lord?" he asked. The angel answered, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring a man named Simon, also known as Peter. He is staying with Simon, the tanner, whose house is by the sea." Now, if I was watching a sitcom, this would remind me going in, which one of you Simons are supposed to come with me? But that's just me. Sorry. When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called two of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened and sent them off to Joppa. And we started looking at this, and I started thinking of Cornelius as reminding me even important people need Jesus. Some of us think, well, we see the story of the fishermen who were just fishermen and ordinary men. They go be disciples, and all these ordinary people that are examples in the Bible. Even our big biblical Bible heroes were normal people that became these great Bible heroes. Well, we find out here Cornelius has a pretty important role. He's leading men, and I'm going to apologize now. I bought some shoes, and it sounds like when I move, if you hear it, I'm not standing in water, but it's just for me. It sounds like every time I move, I'm squishing. So I apologize if you hear that. I'm just apologizing to my ears because I'm squishing. But Cornelius is kind of a big deal. He's a leader of some men. He's a leader, and it looks like he's a leader in his household. And that's one of the things I want to start with is understand you have a role, you have a job as a leader. Now Cornelius has a title as a leader. He's in charge of some men. But every single one of us have that opportunity and within us to be a leader. Not all leaders are the same. Even in sports, not all leaders are the same. I talked to a group of high school kids on Wednesday, and I told them, I said, some of you are going to score a lot of points. Some of you may not even get off the bench. Some of you may be a defensive specialist, but every single one of you have a role to lead in the spot that you're at. And every single one of you here, including myself, and I always start with Everly and all the way around, we are all leaders, an opportunity to make an impact on where we're at. The other thing that I notice and that I love is it says here, he's not only a leader of the Italian regiment, but he and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. He not only was a leader at his job, but he made sure, and again, this may be some assuming, but the people in his family are following, was a leader in his four walls. Guys, a lot of times we forget that role to be the leader inside the four walls. How are you leading? And sometimes I look, how am I leading inside the four walls? Because if you're it's kind of like you be a great Christian here on Sunday, but what are we Monday through Saturday? You can be a great leader for everybody else, but what's happening in your home? Are you leading at home? Are you leading and being present? That's the thing that I wanted to share with you today. It's important, and I'm going to tell you, I can be just as bad. Praise God, it's on the phone, on the floor. But it's important for us as leaders, it's important for us as people to be present. If you're not present, it's hard to lead people. Because when people know you're not present, they're not going to follow you. And I love how Cornelius takes his job serious, takes his home serious, and we've got to do that too. You can't get a master's without being present. You can't lead the people without being present. You can't be the husband or the father or the wife or the mother if you're not present. I thought about telling this, and somebody got mad last time, but I'm going to tell it. Oh, it's a gamble. I'll stop. But it's, well, okay. Paul. Yeah, the guy that's leaving says go with it. I enjoy golf. And a few years ago, Tiger was back playing. And there's all these people watching Tiger with their phones. Because it wasn't at the Masters. You can do that at any golf course but the Augusta National. And everybody's got their phone and they're just taking pictures and hoping it doesn't go off and nobody gets mad and they're filming and they're watching. And there's a guy just holding a beverage. And he's just watching. The company started a whole campaign about him being present. Enjoying the moment. And for us, how many times do we miss out on moments because we're not present? How many times do our wives feel like they're missing the moments because we're not present? It can go the same for husbands if wives are not present. It's important if we lead to be present. And sometimes in order to do that, and we were talking about it in the kitchen, sometimes we got to say no so that we can be present where we're supposed to be. So Cornelius is leading. Cornelius is being present. And we see and we talk about how Cornelius not only how the gospel is important for everybody, but it also reminds us that all of us for every single one of us, there's always a next step. Because look, and this is what we might call a Bible Belt guy, because if you read this, and you read this about somebody in Rotan, or Roby, or Merkel, or Abilene, or Sylvester, or Macaulay, you name it. We'll even throw out Royston. It says he gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. God-fearing. Sounds like he does a lot of the things you're supposed to do right. Pray to God, recognized, gave, prayed, was there. His next step, now in his defense, he's Gentile, is to meet Jesus. Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as memorial before God. Now we're going to send for Simon, Peter. Look what happens. Well, first, be sure I read this correctly. Understood that he still the need to move into the gospel. And this is one of the things I wrote down of all the stuff that I talked about or looked up and God was sharing with me, is moving into the gospel. And what I mean by that is that story of kind of the way that Cornelius read, and I may be overlooking it or over spiritualizing it or whatever, is that for a lot of people that live in this area, in this part of the country, we attend church, we give, we may even partake, we may even follow in baptism, but the motions happen and we don't move into the true gospel of giving our life to Jesus. We become default Christians because we live in the 325. We become default Christians because we've grown up in the same family and everybody in that family loves Jesus. Everybody in that family has gone to the church for however many years. And the truth is, until you personally say, Jesus, I want a relationship with you, it's just things until you move into the gospel and let the gospel of Jesus change your life. That the punishment he took, the blood that he shed, that you accept and believe on him. So we got Cornelius. Let's get to the next part of Peter, and I'll get close. So Peter comes into play. He goes sees, but in this time before Peter comes to see Cornelius, it said about noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat, and while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its four corners. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Peter says, "Surely not, Lord. I've never eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to him a second time, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 more times. Immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. While Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was, stopped on the gate, knocked on the door. "Hey, people out there asking for you." Peter was still thinking about the vision. The Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you, so get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them." Peter went down. "Why have you come?" The men replied, "We've got a man named Cornelius, a centurion. He's a righteous man, God-fearing man who's respected by all the Jewish people. Holy angel told him to ask you to come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say." And what you have to say is the gospel. And I say all this for Peter. Peter, and this is where this change is happening. Peter thinks when he tells God no, he's doing the right thing. Now, God, are you sure? No, God, no. I'm not supposed to eat anything impure and clean. And God says, "Hey, I told you to kill, told you to eat, don't call anything impure." Things change. One of those is read Leviticus 11. Now, none of us are probably disappointed we don't eat camel anymore. You probably haven't gone to say, "Hey, Can I get a chicken fried camel? But things changed. And at that time, and it was, I mean, the word of the Lord came, hey, don't do these things. Don't eat this. Don't do that. But now God is saying, hey, that new covenant, the Gentiles are coming on board because why? The gospel is for everybody. The gospel is for everyone. And so as we wrap up, I want us to look at this, and I'll tell you my favorite part of this story. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the believers from Joppa went along. The following day, he arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. I think that's important. The reason I think that's important is when God told him to send for Peter, he trusted that Peter was going to show up. So he said, hey, y'all come on. And I promise I'm going to wrap it up. I'm getting close, I know. It reminds me of what church is supposed to be like. Hey, y'all come. I'm going to invite you. God is doing some things. But for here in this situation, Cornelius is trusting that God told him to send for Peter, and Peter's coming, and his people are there. And as Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. But Peter made him get up, stand up. He said, I am only a man myself. Told you. That's my favorite part of this story. And that may sound weird, that may sound dumb. That is my favorite part of the story. Because Peter is a stud when it comes to, I mean, he had some issues. But when you think about what Peter did, preach in front of people, 3,000 people get saved, 5,000 people get saved, raised Dorcas in chapter 9. He's a stud. And he walks in, and Cornelius, who's in charge of tons of men, falls at his feet and said, out of reverence. And Peter says, I've always thought, a side note would have been, Peter said, this is pretty cool. I am worthy. But he says, no, get up. I'm just a man. And so if you get anything out of today is this, the gospel is for everyone. The gospel is needed for everyone. So the things I would ask you to walk away with before your stomach starts saying, I'm really, really hungry, is lead where you're at. Be present where you're at. Because people know when you're not present. Your spouse, your work, your kids, your parents, and for some, and even for me sometimes, that's hard. Because you know what we're really good at is consuming ourselves. That's easy. Consuming ourselves. Know that the gospel is for everyone. And the other thing, and I'll close with this. Cornelius' next step was trusting Jesus and receiving the gospel. What is your next step? Is it baptism? Is it actually going forward and trusting Jesus with salvation? Is it joining a church? Is it starting a ministry? Is it stopping something? What is your next step? So Pat's going to come and play, and I just want to challenge you those things. Be a leader. Be present where you're at. Know that the gospel is for everyone. And what is your next step? Pat's going to come and play. You can stand, and if you need to come forward, if you need to do whatever it is that you need to do, you come as Pat plays.